I had my first airplane flight at a very early age, when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old, perhaps. My father, who was quite a fan of early aviation, took me out to where a barnstormer was flying an old Curtis Jenny biplane. The flyer's name was Ben Gregory, and we just barely got airborne, 7,500 feet perhaps, when the engine quit. Well, we headed down toward a barbed wire fence. It looked like a disaster was impending, but Ben Gregory managed somehow or other to lift that plane over the fence and into a field of corn stubble, and we were fine. I thought that was the flight. I was just as pleased as could be with it. You know, as youngsters in the 20s, my generation were all airplane happy. We built model airplanes. We followed the exploits of all the pioneers, Lindbergh and Earhart, Wiley, Post. And so when the space program came along, well, that was my story.
This is Walter Cronkite reporting from the cabin of a C-131 over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. This aircraft is executing a maneuver to make it and everyone in it temporarily weightless. What are the hazards and what are our scientists doing to ensure man's survival in the hostile environment of outer space? This is the lunar roving vehicle, which is the big difference in this flight of Apollo 15.
They walked down the path we're following here.
He really did his homework extremely well, and of course it showed up in his comments. It just naturally came through.
That's a posigrade maneuver, in other words, a forward maneuver to raise his perigee from that 100-mile low point to...
You say, well, now here's a guy who just doesn't come down here and read a script at the last minute. He actually studies what's going on.
That's at the apogee. They fire at the apogee to raise the perigee. The perigee...
I must confess, I flunked physics. My teacher would have been appalled that I was explaining orbital physics, one of the most difficult areas, to a waiting world. Well, I'd worked at it. I studied like the devil to understand that stuff.
The time here at Cape Canaveral, 9:31. With
the early coverage from the Cape was primitive to the extreme.
The Redstone rocket is ready. The Mercury capsule is ready. Commander Alan Shepard, our astronaut, is ready.
We broadcast from the back of a station wagon. We just rolled the station wagon out on the press site, they called it. That was all.
And Shepard emerges from the van.
The first manned flight was the Alan Shepard flight, of course, the Mercury flight on top of Redstone rocket. And some of us have been watching the development of the rocketry program, I think had considerable trepidations about that flight. We'd seen those rockets breaking up, exploding in flight.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
So it was with particular glee that we were able to watch a successful launch of Shepard on that little suborbital pop downrange.
And it appears that this Redstone got away all right.
A-OK, full go.
There he is. As he emerges from the plane, he is met by Grissom and Sladen.
I did get a call from Jack Kennedy, from the president, and approximately 3 weeks after my 16 minutes of spaceflight experience is when he made the announcement.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. This is Mercury Control.
I don't know any words for this except the trite ones. Tension is mounting here at Cape Canaveral. Grand Central Station in New York.
I think that our conquest of space will probably be the most important story of the whole 20th century.
Liftoff.
Man escaping his environment.
Looks like a good flight. Oh, go, baby.
The MA6 vehicle is still climbing nicely.
In those early days of the space program, the early astronauts were all kind of handsome, what you'd think of as almost playboys types. They weren't. I mean, they were quite serious types. The movie The Right Stuff did them great injustice. But they certainly had their light moments.
Do you think that...
We were all of a family. We grew up together. We all played touch football, went to the bars together at Cocoa Beach. We had a lot of time to kill and got to know each other.
The trouble with a rocket is you can't tell its size when it sits alone out on the pad, but you can with models like these. All built
By the time the Saturn launch came along, we were pretty used to pretty big rockets.
But look at this baby, the Saturn V, 363 feet tall.
But none of us were prepared for the Saturn, that huge beast of a thing. They'd built these quarters for us, the broadcast booths for each of the networks. We had a two-story place with a big glass
10,
front.
9. Ignition sequence starts.
This first unmanned
5,
Saturn,
4,
what a...
We have ignition. All engines are running.
Well, for heaven's sake,
We have
there was an
liftoff.
earthquake. The earth shook.
My
God, our building's shaking here. Our building's shaking. Oh, it's terrific. The building's shaking.
We had tiles lying in tracks in the roof. The tracks all bent, and the acoustical tiles were falling all around us.
This big glass window is shaking. We're holding it with our hands.
I put my hand up to hold that window in place.
Look at that rocket go into the clouds at 3,000 feet.
It was only afterwards that the glass people came rushing and said, "Don't ever do that again. The glass is made to vibrate. If you stop the vibration, it'll break for sure."
Good morning, and it's windy, quite gusty, and cloud covered here at Cape Kennedy. And there's quite a storm area building up to the north of here.
There was one day that I took the occasion of a long period of commercials to take a rest stop. And they had erected at one end of the broadcast row there a toilet area. I went to there and used one of the booths. When I got ready to leave, the door had jammed. The lock had jammed on the door. And here I couldn't get out. With that door being tricky like that, I just barely got back on air in time. But I had our art department make up a sign, "Private, David Brinkley." And we went down and hung it on the door. I hoped that maybe he'd come and figure it was really for him and use it and get locked in, but I'd get rid of my opposition that way.
That's it. Apollo 11, 1 hour and 16 minutes to the beginning of man's greatest adventure.
The landing on the moon presented an interesting emotional challenge for me. I'd had just as much time to prepare for that landing as the space program did. I'd watched it from the beginning.
We are indeed pleased here at CBS News to have the distinguished Mercury 7 astronaut Walter Cronkite working.
Naturally, I had this awe of going on the air with Walter, so I was sort of seeking the father-son guidance from Walter of what can we say? What are you going to say when these men land on the moon? Oh, well, I've considered that quite seriously. I see, Walter. Well, thank you.
3, 2, 1, 0.
So we went on and had liftoff.
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Oh, boy.
And then subsequent to liftoff is a quiet time where they're in orbit getting ready to burn to go on their lunar trajectory. I said, Walter, this really perplexes me. Here's a world-class journalist, and you're still procrastinating on what you're going to say when these men are on the moon. I'll be with you, and I'd like to get a feel for it. Oh, I'll have something very good to say, Walter. No, don't worry about that. No problem at all.
30 seconds forward.
And finally, we're approaching lunar landing, and we're off camera, and we're looking at each other, and I said, Walter, what are you going to say?
Houston,
Oh, jeez.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Golly, gee, wow. The world-class journalist has spoken.
When that vehicle landed on the moon, I was speechless. I really couldn't say a thing.
The crew of Apollo 13, wish everybody there nice evening.
It all began just about 10 o'clock last night, Eastern Time, with this announcement from Apollo 13, then 205,000 miles from Earth.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. We've had a main beam bus audible, and we hit a pretty large bang associated with the